Black girl's assertion stirs corporate room, shocks CEO with insight. The boardroom fell silent as Zara Williams stood, her slender fingers gripping the edge of the polished mahogany table. At 26, she was by far the youngest person in the room and the only black woman. The air conditioning hummed softly in the background, a stark contrast to the tension that now permeated the space. "With all due respect, Mr. Harrington," Zara said, her voice steady despite the rapid beating of her heart, "what you're proposing isn't innovation, it's erasure." Richard Harrington, CEO of Vertex Innovations, stared at her with widened eyes. His mouth opened slightly, then closed, as 58 years of corporate authority seemed momentarily suspended in disbelief. The 12 other executives shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Some averted their eyes, others exchanged glances. None spoke. "For 3 years," Zara continued, her resolve strengthening, "I've watched brilliant ideas from diverse teams get diluted or dismissed until they're unrecognizable. This latest initiative isn't failing because the market isn't ready. It's failing because the people who understand that market were systematically removed from the decision-making process." Harrington's face flushed a deep crimson. The vein at his temple pulsed visibly as he leaned forward. "Ms. Williams, this is hardly the appropriate." "Then when is appropriate, sir?" Zara interrupted, something she'd never done before. "When quarterly profits drop another 15%, when our competitors launch the exact product we dismissed as unmarketable, when we've lost every employee who doesn't fit the profile of the people sitting in this room." The silence that followed was deafening. It was Marcus Chen, the CFO, who finally broke it with a quiet clearing of his throat. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "we should hear Ms. Williams out." Harrington's eyes darted around the table, measuring the expressions of his executive team. Then, unexpectedly, his shoulders relaxed slightly. "All right, Ms. Williams," he said, gesturing to her chair. "You have the floor. Show us what we're missing." In that moment, as Zara took a deep breath and prepared to speak, no one in the room could have predicted how her words would transform not just Vertex Innovations, but each of their lives in profound and unexpected ways. The fluorescent lights of the office seemed unusually harsh as Zara packed her belongings into a cardboard box. 3 framed certificates, a small potted succulent, and a collection of notebooks filled with ideas she'd never had the chance to share. 3 years at Vertex Innovations, and despite her rapid promotion to product strategy manager, she'd always felt like an outsider looking in. "You know he could fire you for that, right?" Zara looked up to see Aiden Parker, her immediate supervisor and the vice president of product development, leaning against her cubicle entrance. At 42, with salt and pepper hair and a perpetually rumpled appearance, Aiden was one of the few executives who had ever shown genuine interest in her ideas. "I'm pretty sure I just fired myself," Zara replied, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Aiden stepped into her cubicle, lowering his voice. "What possessed you to challenge Harrington like that, in front of the entire executive team?" Zara sighed, placing her company laptop in the box. "Did you know that the Next Gen initiative was originally conceived by Tarek in customer research? His team spent 6 months gathering data that showed exactly how to position it for success. Then marketing redesigned it to appeal to a broader audience. Engineering stripped half the features that made it unique, and by the time it launched, it was unrecognizable." "That happens with products all the time," Aiden said, though his expression suggested he wasn't entirely comfortable with his own defense. "Yes, but it happens disproportionately to ideas that come from certain people," Zara countered. "And those people eventually leave, like Tarek did, like Carmen from legal, like I'm about to." Aiden frowned, crossing his arms. "Harrington hasn't actually asked you to leave yet. It's just a matter of time," Zara said, tucking a braided lock behind her ear. "I basically told the CEO of a Fortune 500 company that he's running his business into the ground because he's too biased to see it." "Maybe," Aiden conceded, "or maybe you told him exactly what he needed to hear." He hesitated, then added, "He's called an emergency strategic review for tomorrow morning, the whole executive team plus you." Zara's hand froze midway to her desk drawer. "What? 9 a.m., conference room A." Aiden straightened up. "I'd hold off on emptying that desk if I were you." As Aiden walked away, Zara slowly sat down, her mind racing. She hadn't planned to speak up in that meeting. After years of biting her tongue, carefully navigating office politics, and watching her colleagues of color gradually disappear from the company, something had finally snapped when Harrington had begun his speech about market resistance to their latest product line. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her roommate, Maya. "Dinner's ready. How was your day?" Zara stared at the screen, unsure how to even begin explaining what had just happened. "Complicated," she typed back. Tell you when I get home." She glanced at the half-packed box on her desk, then at the family photo beside her computer, her parents beaming proudly at her college graduation, her younger sister making a peace sign. Her father had always told her, "Your voice is your power. Don't let anyone silence it." Today, she had finally used her voice. Whether it would cost her everything remained to be seen. Richard Harrington stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his corner office, watching the city lights flicker to life as dusk settled over the skyline. 32 years he'd spent building Vertex Innovations from a small tech startup to a global leader. 32 years of careful decisions, strategic planning, and unwavering confidence in his vision, until today. "Richard," his assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Your wife is on line 1. She wants to know if you'll be home for dinner." He pressed the button without turning from the window. "Tell her not to wait up, Margaret." He heard the soft sigh from his assistant, the same gentle disapproval she'd expressed for the past 15 years whenever he chose work over family. But tonight was different. Tonight, he wasn't staying late to review quarterly projections or prepare for a board meeting. Tonight, he was questioning everything. The words of that young woman, Zara Williams, had lodged in his mind like splinters. It's not innovation, it's erasure. What did she know about innovation? About the pressures of running a company this size? About the thousands of jobs that depended on his decisions? And yet, he turned from the window and walked to his desk, opening his laptop. With a few clicks, he pulled up the company's performance metrics for the past 5 years. The data told a story he'd been reluctant to fully acknowledge: declining market share, decreasing innovation indices, increasing employee turnover. The exodus of talent had been particularly notable among women and people of color, but he'd attributed that to industry-wide challenges in retention. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, closing his laptop. Marcus Chen entered, a manila folder tucked under his arm. As CFO, Marcus had been with the company almost as long as Richard himself. They'd weathered recessions, market shifts, and technological revolutions together. "I thought you might still be here," Marcus said, placing the folder on Richard's desk. "The numbers you asked for." Richard nodded toward a chair. "Sit down, Marcus. What's your take on what happened in the boardroom today?" Marcus settled into the chair, his expression carefully neutral. Ms. Williams spoke out of turn. "Yes, but was she wrong?" The CFO's pause was telling. "The data suggests there may be merit to her concerns." Richard leaned back in his chair. "We've lost 17% of our innovation staff in the past 18 months. 62% of those departures were women or people of color." "I'm aware," Marcus replied quietly. "And you didn't think to bring this to my attention?" Marcus met his gaze steadily. "I did, twice. You said it reflected industry-wide retention challenges." Richard felt a heaviness settle in his chest. Had he really dismissed such significant data? And the next-gen initiative? Williams mentioned it was originally conceived differently. Tariq Rahman's team developed the initial concept, Marcus confirmed. It tested extremely well with younger demographics and in diverse urban markets. After marketing and engineering modifications, he trailed off. "It flopped," Richard finished for him. He opened the folder Marcus had brought, scanning the figures. "We've lost 43 million on that launch." 47.6, Marcus corrected gently. "And counting." Richard ran a hand over his face, suddenly feeling every one of his 58 years. "Have I been that blind, Marcus?" The CFO considered his response carefully. "Not blind, Richard, perhaps selectively focused. That's diplomatic." "It's accurate," Marcus countered. "You see what you expect to see. We all do. Ms. Williams simply offered a different perspective, one we've been systematically filtering out." Richard stood abruptly, returning to the window. The city sprawled before him, countless lights representing countless lives, all different, all valuable. "I've called a strategic review for tomorrow. I want you to prepare a comprehensive analysis of our attrition patterns and innovation pipeline. No filters, no diplomatic language. I want the unvarnished truth." "And Ms. Williams?" Richard turned back to face his old friend. "She'll be there. I need to hear what else we've been missing." After Marcus left, Richard remained at the window for a long time. In the reflection of the glass, he could see his office, symbols of his success surrounding him. Awards, accolades, evidence of a career spent climbing to the top. Yet for the first time in years, he questioned whether he'd been climbing the right mountain all along. He picked up his phone and dialed his wife's number directly. After 3 rings, she answered, surprise evident in her voice. "Richard, is everything all right?" "No," he admitted, the word feeling foreign on his tongue. "But I think it might be eventually. I'm coming home for dinner, Alina. There's something I need to talk to you about." Maya's apartment smelled of cumin and sautéed vegetables when Zara finally arrived home. The small two-bedroom they shared in Brookview Heights was modest but comfortable, decorated with an eclectic mix of thrift store finds, family photos, and art collected from local street fairs. "There she is," Maya called from the kitchen. "I was starting to think you'd been kidnapped by corporate America." Zara dropped her bag by the door and kicked off her heels, feeling the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. "Something like that." Maya appeared in the kitchen doorway, wooden spoon in hand, her curly hair piled high on her head. As a nurse at the county hospital, she worked shifts that rarely aligned with Zara's 9-to-5 schedule, making their shared dinners precious commodities. "Oh," Maya said, eyeing Zara critically. "That's your either something amazing or something terrible happened face. Which is it?" Zara sank onto their worn sofa. "I honestly have no idea." Over plates of Maya's vegetable curry, Zara recounted the events of the afternoon meeting. Maya's expressions shifted from shock to admiration to concern as the story unfolded. "So you just stood up and told the CEO he was wrong, in front of everyone?" Maya asked, eyes wide. "I didn't plan it," Zara admitted. "It just happened." 3 years of watching the same patterns, seeing talented people leave because their voices weren't valued. Something snapped. "And now they want you in this emergency meeting tomorrow?" Maya whistled low. "Either they're going to fire you spectacularly, or what?" Zara prompted when Maya didn't continue. Maya shrugged. "Or they actually heard you." Zara picked at her food, appetite diminished by anxiety. "My mother would say I should have kept my head down, played the game. Worked twice as hard, been twice as good, and waited for my opportunity." "And what would your father say?" A small smile touched Zara's lips. "He'd say it's about damn time." "I'm with your dad on this one," Maya said, reaching across the table to squeeze Zara's hand. "Whatever happens tomorrow, you spoke your truth. That counts for something." Later that night, as Zara prepared for bed, she found herself staring at her closet, contemplating what to wear to what might be her last day at Vertex Innovations. Her phone buzzed with an incoming email. From Richard, Harrington at Vertex Innovations. Calm subject, tomorrow's meeting time. 11:27 p.m. Ms. Williams, in preparation for tomorrow's strategic review, I would appreciate if you could come prepared to elaborate on the concerns you raised today, particularly regarding the Next-Gen initiative and your observations about our product development process. This is not disciplinary in nature, but rather an opportunity for the executive team to gain perspective we may be lacking. Regards, Richard Harrington, CEO, Vertex Innovations. Zara read the email 3 times, trying to decipher its true meaning. Was this genuine, or was Harrington simply documenting her insubordination before letting her go? She thought about what she would say if given a real chance to be heard. There was so much the leadership team needed to understand about the experiences of employees like herself, about the wealth of perspectives they were systematically excluding, about the market opportunities they were missing as a result. If this was to be her last stand at Vertex, she would make it count. With renewed determination, Zara opened her laptop and began to organize her thoughts, pulling together examples, data, and specific recommendations. Around 2 a.m., she finally closed her computer and slid into bed, exhausted but strangely at peace. Whatever tomorrow brought, she had found her voice, and that, she realized, was its own kind of victory. Conference Room A, typically cold and impersonal with its stark minimalist design, seemed especially intimidating the next morning. Zara arrived 15 minutes early, only to find most of the executive team already present, engaged in hushed conversations that ceased abruptly when she entered. Aiden gave her an encouraging nod from across the room, while others regarded her with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. The chair at the head of the table, Richard Harrington's usual seat, remained conspicuously empty. At precisely 9:00 a.m., the CEO entered, followed by Marcus Chen and a woman Zara didn't recognize, tall, elegant, with silver-streaked dark hair and an air of quiet authority. "Good morning," Harrington said, taking his seat. "Thank you all for rearranging your schedules on such short notice. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce Dr. Alina Harrington, who will be observing our discussion today." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. Everyone knew of Alina Harrington, a renowned organizational psychologist and Richard's wife of 30 years, but she had never before participated in company meetings. "As you're all aware," Harrington continued, "yesterday's product strategy meeting took an unexpected turn." His eyes found Zara's. "Ms. Williams raised concerns about our innovation process that warrant serious consideration." Rather than addressing these privately, I believe there's value in examining them together as a leadership team. He turned to a screen behind him, clicking to display a series of graphs. Marcus has prepared an analysis of our innovation metrics over the past 5 years. The data is troubling. For the next 20 minutes, Marcus walked them through declining innovation indices, increasing product development costs, and accelerating talent attrition, particularly among diverse employees. The numbers painted a stark picture of a company losing its competitive edge. In light of this data, Harrington said when Marcus finished, I'd like Ms. Williams to share her perspective on where we've gone wrong and what we might do differently. All eyes turned to Zara. The moment she'd both dreaded and prepared for had arrived. She took a deep breath, opened her notebook, and began. Thank you, Mr. Harrington. I want to start by saying that I believe in Vertex's mission and potential. That's why I joined 3 years ago, and it's why I'm still here. But I've observed patterns that are undermining that potential, specifically in how ideas are evaluated, developed, and implemented. She described the systematic ways in which concepts from diverse teams were diluted, explaining how the process subtly but consistently favored ideas that aligned with the experiences and perspectives of the primarily white, male leadership team. The Next Gen initiative is just one example, she continued, pulling up slides she'd prepared overnight. Here's the original concept as developed by Tariq Rahman's team, based on extensive market research with Gen Z and millennial consumers across diverse demographics. She displayed the original product renderings, feature sets, and marketing approach, then contrasted them with the final version that had been launched to disappointing results. The original concept addressed needs and preferences we identified among younger, more diverse consumers, a growing market segment we're currently underserving. But at each stage of development, these elements were stripped away in favor of approaches that felt safer or more mainstream to decision-makers who don't represent those consumers. As she spoke, Zara noticed something surprising. They were listening, really listening. Even those who had initially seemed hostile were now engaged, taking notes, studying the data she presented. When she finished her presentation, Harrington leaned forward, fingers steepled. You've made compelling points about our product development process, Ms. Williams, but you also mentioned yesterday that this reflects a larger pattern of, what did you call it? Erasure. Yes, Zara confirmed, heart pounding but voice steady. When people from underrepresented groups consistently see their contributions minimized or dismissed, they eventually stop contributing or leave entirely. That's why we've lost talented people like Tariq, Carmen, and many others. It's not just about diverse perspectives being valuable for innovation, though they absolutely are. It's about creating an environment where everyone's contributions are genuinely evaluated on their merits, not filtered through unconscious biases. Eleanor Harrington, who had been silently observing until now, spoke for the first time. What you're describing aligns with research on psychological safety and inclusive leadership. Organizations where diverse perspectives are truly valued consistently outperform those with homogeneous thinking patterns. She turned to her husband. Richard, this may explain the innovation plateau you've been concerned about. Richard nodded slowly. Ms. Williams, if you were in my position, what specific changes would you implement? The directness of the question momentarily caught Zara off guard. She had prepared to defend her observations, not to offer solutions at this scale. But as she gathered her thoughts, she realized she'd been mentally designing these changes for years. 3 immediate actions, she said decisively. First, restructure the product development process to maintain diverse input throughout, not just at the concept stage. Second, implement blind review protocols for evaluating ideas and innovations, removing identifying information that might trigger unconscious bias. And third, create accountability measures that track not just diversity in hiring, but inclusion in practice, whose ideas get implemented, whose concerns get addressed, who advances and who leaves. The room fell silent as her words hung in the air. Then, to everyone's surprise, Richard Harrington smiled, a genuine smile that softened the usually stern lines of his face. Ms. Williams, he said, I'd like you to lead this transformation. Zara blinked. I'm sorry. You've identified critical flaws in our approach and proposed thoughtful solutions, he said. Rather than simply implementing your recommendations, I believe we need a dedicated team focused on organizational transformation with you at the helm. Before Zara could respond, Jessica Winters, the HR director, interjected. With all due respect, Richard, while Ms. Williams has raised important points, she's relatively junior and has no experience leading organizational change at this scale. That's precisely why she's the right person, Alina countered before her husband could respond. She sees what the rest of you have become blind to. Sometimes fresh eyes and lived experience are more valuable than traditional qualifications. I agree, Richard said firmly. Ms. Williams will lead this initiative, reporting directly to me with full access to the resources and support she needs. He surveyed the room. Any other objections? Several executives shifted uncomfortably, but none spoke up. Aiden caught Zara's eye and gave her a subtle thumbs-up beneath the table. Ms. Williams, Richard prompted. Are you willing to take this on? Zara felt a momentary surge of panic. Was this really happening? Was she prepared for this level of responsibility? Then she thought of Tarek, Carmen, and all the others who had left because their voices weren't heard. She thought of her father's words about using her voice as her power. Yes, she said, her voice stronger than she expected. I am. Excellent, Richard replied. You'll need a team, recommendations. Without hesitation, Zara said, I'd like to bring back Tarek Rahman if he's willing, and Carmen Rodriguez from legal. They both understand these challenges intimately and have valuable expertise. Richard nodded. Done. Work with HR to make competitive offers. Anyone else? I'd like Aiden Parker involved, Zara said, glancing at her supervisor. He's been one of the few executives consistently willing to consider diverse perspectives. Aiden looked surprised but nodded his agreement. Very well, Richard said. Zara, Aiden, Marcus, and I will meet this afternoon to establish parameters for this initiative. The rest of you expect significant changes to our product development and decision-making processes in the coming weeks. He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. That's all for now. As the executives filed out, many casting curious glances at Zara, Richard approached her. A word in my office, please. Zara followed him, heart still racing with a mixture of exhilaration and trepidation. What had she just committed to? And was Harrington's support genuine, or was this an elaborate setup for failure? Either way, there was no turning back now. Richard's corner office felt different in the morning light, less intimidating, somehow, though no less impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, while subtle design elements spoke of power and success accumulated over decades. Please sit, Richard said, gesturing to a seating area rather than the formal visitor chairs facing his desk. Alina joined them, her observant gaze making Zara feel as though she were being gently but thoroughly assessed. I imagine you have questions, Richard began once they were settled. Several, Zara admitted. Starting with, why me? Yesterday I essentially accused you of running your company into the ground because of bias. Today you're putting me in charge of a major organizational initiative. That's unexpected. Richard exchanged a glance with his wife before answering. Last night was the first time in years I've left the office before 8 p.m. Alina and I had a long conversation about Vertex, about leadership, about legacy. He paused. About blind spots. Richard has built an extraordinary company, Alina added. But like many successful leaders, he's developed certain filters in how he processes information. We all do. It's human nature to gravitate toward the familiar and to unconsciously discount perspectives that challenge our worldview. Alina helped me see that your intervention yesterday wasn't an attack, but a gift, Richard continued. A chance to course-correct before it's too late. He leaned forward. I've been worried about our innovation pipeline for months, but I couldn't pinpoint the problem. You did, because you see what I can't. Zara processed this, trying to reconcile the humble, reflective man before her with the intimidating CEO she'd known for 3 years. And the new position, is that real or symbolic? Very real, Richard assured her. With real authority, real resources, and real accountability. Which brings me to my question for you. Are you prepared for what this will entail? The resistance you'll face, the scrutiny, the potential for failure. The directness of the question was startling, but Zara appreciated it. I don't know, she answered honestly. I've never done anything like this before, but I know what's not working and I have ideas about what might work better. I'm willing to learn, to listen, and to lead as best I can. Alina smiled, seeming pleased with this response. Awareness of one's limitations is the beginning of wisdom. Richard tells me you have a background in anthropology as well as business. That cross-disciplinary perspective will serve you well. Richard nodded in agreement. We'll announce the new organizational transformation initiative next week. In the meantime, I'd like you to draft a preliminary framework. Your vision, key objectives, resource requirements, and timeline. We'll refine it together before the formal launch. As Zara left the office 30 minutes later, her mind was spinning with possibilities. She had entered Vertex Innovations yesterday morning as a mid-level manager, frustrated and ready to quit. She was leaving today as the head of a major corporate initiative with direct access to the CEO. The weight of responsibility was daunting, but beneath it was something else, a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. This was her chance to create the kind of workplace she'd always wished for, not just for herself, but for everyone who'd ever felt unheard or undervalued. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Still employed, or should I break out the ice cream?" Zara smiled, typing back. "Employed." Promoted, terrified, details tonight. As she waited for the elevator, Aiden appeared beside her. "So," he said, "my new boss, huh?" Zara winced slightly. "That's going to be awkward, isn't it?" "Nah," Aiden replied with a grin. "I always knew you were destined for bigger things, just didn't expect it to happen quite so dramatically." His expression grew more serious. "For what it's worth, I think Harrington made the right call. This company needs the shakeup you're about to give it." "I hope so," Zara said as they stepped into the elevator. "Because I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing." Aiden laughed. "Welcome to executive leadership. None of us do. We're all just making it up as we go along." He pressed the button for their floor. "The difference is you're willing to admit it." The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of meetings, research, planning, and recruitment. Richard had been true to his word about resources and support, giving Zara a dedicated budget, office space, and the freedom to build her team. To her surprise and delight, both Tarek and Carmen had agreed to return to Vertex. Tarek had left 6 months earlier for a smaller company where he felt his ideas were respected. Carmen had departed after 2 years of seeing her legal expertise consistently second-guessed by male colleagues with less experience. "I never thought I'd come back," Carmen admitted as she and Zara shared lunch in the company cafeteria. At 38, Carmen had the polished demeanor of someone who had fought hard for her place in corporate America, her straightened hair and impeccable wardrobe serving as armor in predominantly white spaces. But the chance to actually change how things work here, that was too good to pass up. "I felt the same when Raman called," Tarek added, joining them with his tray. Younger than both women at 29, his casual style and quiet confidence reflected his generation's different relationship with corporate culture. "When he explained what you're trying to do and that Harrington is actually backing it, I had to see for myself." "It's still surreal," Zara confessed. "Sometimes I wake up thinking I dreamed the whole thing." "Well, pinch yourself because it's happening," Carmen said, nodding toward the cafeteria entrance where Richard Harrington had just appeared. The CEO rarely ate in the company cafeteria, a fact noted by the sudden hush that fell over the room as he approached their table. "May I join you?" he asked, setting down his tray. "Of course," Zara replied, trying to hide her surprise. Richard sat, nodding to Tarek and Carmen. "Mr. Rahman, Ms. Rodriguez, welcome back to Vertex. I hope we can make your return experience significantly better than your previous tenure." "That's the plan," Carmen replied, her tone professional but with an undertone of challenge. Richard smiled slightly, seeming to appreciate her directness. "Indeed it is." He turned to Zara. "I've reviewed your framework for the transformation initiative. It's excellent, comprehensive, thoughtful, and bold. The board has approved the full budget you requested." Zara exhaled in relief. "That's wonderful news, thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Richard cautioned. "The hard part is just beginning." "I've scheduled a company-wide town hall for next Monday to announce the initiative and introduce your team. I'd like you to present the vision and high-level strategy." Zara felt a flutter of anxiety. Speaking truth to power in a boardroom was one thing. Presenting to the entire company of over 2,000 employees was quite another. "The town hall will be live-streamed to all offices globally," Richard continued. "It's important that everyone understands this isn't just another diversity program or HR initiative. This is a fundamental reimagining of how we operate as a company." As Richard outlined his expectations for the presentation, Zara noticed something she'd never seen before. Employees from throughout the company were watching their interaction with unconcealed interest. The CEO, sitting with 3 people of color, engaged in what appeared to be a collegial conversation rather than a hierarchical exchange, was clearly an unusual sight. It was a small moment, but it highlighted the scale of the change they were trying to create. Corporate culture wasn't just about policies and procedures. It was about visible signals, daily interactions, and unspoken hierarchies. Later that afternoon, as Zara worked on her town hall presentation, she received an unexpected visitor. Jessica Winters, the HR director who had questioned her appointment, appeared in the doorway of Zara's new office. "Do you have a moment?" Jessica asked, her expression unreadable. "Of course," Zara said, gesturing to a chair. "What can I do for you?" Jessica closed the door before sitting, her posture rigid. "I want to be clear about something." I didn't object to your appointment because I don't value your perspective or because I don't recognize the problems you've identified. Okay, Zara said cautiously. I objected because I've spent 15 years trying to implement similar changes through traditional channels, Jessica continued, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. Diversity training, inclusion initiatives, mentorship programs. Always with limited resources, minimal executive support, and the expectation of miraculous results. Understanding dawned on Zara. And now I've been given everything you were denied. Jessica nodded, a flicker of pain crossing her features. I've been fighting this battle my entire career, often as the only woman in the room. To see you walk in with direct access to the CEO, a dedicated budget, and carte blanche to make the changes I've advocated for years. She shook her head. It's complicated. Zara considered her response carefully. This conversation felt pivotal not just for her relationship with Jessica, but for the success of the initiative itself. I think I understand, she said finally. And I owe you an apology. I've been so focused on building my team that I failed to recognize one of the most important allies already here. She leaned forward. Jessica, I need your experience, your institutional knowledge, and your perspective. Not as a subordinate or a consultant, but as a partner in this work. Jessica looked surprised. What exactly are you proposing? Co-leadership, Zara said simply. You bring 15 years of experience in organizational development and diversity work. I bring fresh perspective and direct experience of the problems we're trying to solve. Together, we could be much more effective than either of us alone. For a long moment, Jessica was silent, studying Zara as if trying to detect any insincerity. Then gradually, the tension in her shoulders eased. You're serious? Completely, Zara confirmed. I've been thinking about asking you actually, but I wasn't sure how you'd respond given your initial objection. A hint of a smile touched Jessica's lips. That was professional jealousy talking, not my finest moment. She straightened in her chair. If we do this, you should know I'm not easy to work with. I'm demanding, detail-oriented, and I don't suffer fools gladly. Good, Zara replied, returning her smile, because this work is too important for anything less than excellence. By the time Jessica left her office an hour later, they had sketched out a revised structure for the initiative that leveraged both their strengths. It wasn't a perfect solution. There would be tension, disagreements, and the need for ongoing negotiation of their roles. But it felt right in a way that Zara's original plan hadn't. As she updated her presentation to reflect this new partnership, Zara reflected on how this small course correction exemplified the very principles she was trying to implement company-wide. Recognizing blind spots, valuing diverse perspectives, and building on existing foundations rather than erasing them. The transformation of Vertex Innovations was beginning with her own approach to leadership. The company auditorium buzzed with anticipation as employees filed in for the town hall meeting. On stage, technicians made final adjustments to microphones and lighting, while large screens displayed the Vertex logo alongside the words Organizational Transformation Initiative in bold letters. Backstage, Zara took deep, calming breaths, reviewing her notes one last time. Jessica stood nearby, immaculate in a tailored suit, projecting the calm confidence of someone who had faced corporate audiences countless times before. Nervous? Richard asked, approaching them. Terrified, Zara admitted. Good, he replied with a slight smile. That means you understand the significance of what we're doing. Alina Harrington joined them, elegant in a simple dress that somehow conveyed both authority and approachability. Remember, she said to Zara, they're already on your side even if they don't know it yet. Everyone wants to feel valued, to have their contributions recognized. You're offering them a path to that reality. As Richard stepped onto the stage to introduce the initiative, Zara felt a sudden calm settle over her. Alina was right. This wasn't about her personal success or failure. It was about creating a workplace where talent could flourish regardless of race, gender, or background. A place where innovation came from the free exchange of diverse perspectives, not the filtered vision of a homogeneous leadership team. When Richard called her name, Zara walked onto the stage with purpose, Jessica at her side. The bright lights momentarily blinded her to the audience, but as her eyes adjusted, she saw row upon row of faces, curious, skeptical, hopeful, resistant, all waiting to hear what changes were coming. Good morning, she began, her voice steady. 3 weeks ago, I stood in a boardroom and spoke a truth that many of you have experienced but few have named. At Vertex Innovations, not all voices are heard equally, not all perspectives are valued, not all talent is recognized. As a result, our company is falling short of its potential. A murmur rippled through the audience, recognition, perhaps, or surprise at such direct acknowledgement of what had long been whispered in break rooms and private Slack channels. Today, with the full support of CEO Richard Harrington and the executive team, Jessica Winters and I are launching an initiative to transform how we work, how we innovate, and how we succeed together. This isn't a diversity program. It's not sensitivity training. It's a fundamental reimagining of our organizational structure, decision-making processes, and culture. For the next 20 minutes, Zara and Jessica alternated in presenting their visions, specific, practical changes to how products would be developed, how ideas would be evaluated, how teams would be structured, and how success would be measured. "We're not asking anyone to lower their standards," Jessica emphasized during her portion. "In fact, we're raising them. We're asking everyone to broaden their perspective, to recognize the limitations of their own experience, and to value the insights that come from different vantage points." When they opened the floor for questions, hands shot up throughout the auditorium. Some questions were skeptical, others supportive, many simply curious about how these changes would affect daily work. Zara and Jessica fielded them with honesty and clarity, acknowledging when they didn't yet have all the answers but emphasizing their commitment to transparency throughout the process. As the town hall concluded, Richard returned to the stage. "Change is never easy," he acknowledged, "and the transformation we're embarking on will challenge us all, myself included, to examine assumptions and practices we've long taken for granted. There will be discomfort, resistance, and missteps along the way. But I believe this is the path to securing Vertex's future as a leader in innovation for decades to come." He turned to Zara and Jessica. "I've asked these two exceptional leaders to hold us all accountable, including me, to creating a workplace where the best ideas win regardless of who proposes them. I expect everyone at Vertex to give them your full cooperation and support." The applause that followed was tentative at first, then growing stronger, not thunderous approval but cautious optimism. It was enough. Real change wouldn't come from a single presentation or executive mandate. It would come through consistent action, demonstrated commitment, and tangible results over time. As they left the stage, Aiden was waiting in the wings. "Impressive," he said, genuine admiration in his voice. "You just put the entire company on notice that business as usual is over." "Now comes the hard part," Jessica replied, "turning words into action." 6 months later, Zara stood in the product showcase room, surrounded by prototypes, market research data, and development timelines for Vertex's newest initiative, a reimagined version of the failed next-gen platform, now called Prism. "The initial user testing results are exceptional," Tarek explained to the assembled team, pointing to metrics on a large display. "Engagement is 78% higher than our previous offering, with particularly strong performance among Gen Z and millennial users across diverse demographics." "What about the technical concerns engineering raised last month?" asked James Werner, the VP of engineering who had initially been one of the more resistant executives to the transformation process. "Addressed," replied Tarek. "We used the cross-functional collaborative model Zara and Jessica implemented. Engineering, design, and marketing worked together from day one rather than in sequence. The result is a product that meets technical requirements while preserving the core elements that appealed to our target market." James nodded, clearly impressed despite himself. "Time to market. 4 months faster than our standard development cycle," Carmen supplied from her position near the door. "The streamlined approval process and elimination of redundant review stages cut nearly 20% from our timeline." Zara observed the interaction with quiet satisfaction. The changes they'd implemented hadn't been easy or universally welcomed. There had been resistance, setbacks, and moments when she'd questioned whether meaningful transformation was truly possible in an organization as established as Vertex. But gradually, results had begun to speak for themselves. Cross-functional teams composed of diverse talent were consistently outperforming traditional development groups. The blind review process for evaluating innovations had surfaced ideas that might otherwise have been overlooked. And perhaps most significantly, employee retention had improved dramatically, particularly among women and people of color. After the meeting concluded, Richard asked Zara to join him for a walk. It had become something of a ritual over the past month's periodic conversations outside the formal meeting structure where they could speak candidly about progress and challenges. "The board is impressed with the Prism metrics," Richard said as they strolled through the campus grounds. "Particularly the accelerated development timeline. In this market, speed is almost as important as quality." It's not just about speed, Zara pointed out. It's about efficiency. When people feel their contributions are valued when they don't have to fight to be heard, they can focus their energy on innovation rather than self-advocacy. Richard nodded thoughtfully. Elinor says the same thing. She's been using Vertex as a case study in her organizational psychology lectures, you know. He glanced at Zara. She says what we're doing here could serve as a model for other companies facing similar challenges. We still have a long way to go, Zara cautioned. The executive team is more diverse now, but middle management remains largely unchanged, and there are pockets of resistance throughout the organization. Of course, Richard acknowledged. Transformation of this magnitude takes years, not months, but the trajectory is clear. He stopped walking, turning to face her directly. Which brings me to a question I've been considering for some time. Where do you see yourself when this initiative is complete? Zara hadn't expected this question. Complete. I'm not sure organizational transformation is ever truly complete. It's ongoing, evolving. Fair point, Richard conceded. Let me rephrase. When the structural changes you've designed are fully implemented and the new processes are standard operating procedure, what's next for Zara Williams? The question stirred something in Zara, a realization that she'd been so focused on the present work that she hadn't considered her own future path. I haven't thought that far ahead, she admitted. Richard smiled slightly. Perhaps you should. The board has been discussing succession planning. Zara's eyes widened. Succession planning? Are you planning to retire? Not immediately, Richard assured her. But in the next 3 to 5 years, yes, and I want to ensure that Vertex continues to evolve in the right direction. He resumed walking. Just something to consider. As Richard moved ahead to greet a group of employees, Zara remained rooted to the spot, processing the implication of his words. Was he suggesting what she thought he was suggesting? Could she, a young black woman who had been a mid-level manager just 6 months ago, potentially be considered as a future CEO of Vertex Innovations? The very idea would have seemed absurd a year ago. But then again, so would the notion that she would stand up in a boardroom and challenge the CEO directly, only to find herself leading a company-wide transformation as a result. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Dinner tonight to celebrate your half-year anniversary of corporate rebellion? Zara smiled, typing back. Absolutely, and I have news. As she walked back toward the main building, Zara reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. What had begun as a moment of frustration, a decision to finally speak her truth regardless of consequences, had catalyzed change far beyond anything she could have imagined. Not just for herself, but for Tarek, Carmen, and countless others who had felt unheard and undervalued. For Richard, who had discovered blind spots in his leadership he hadn't known existed. For Vertex as a company, now on a path to more authentic innovation and sustained success. One voice, one moment of courage, had created ripples that continued to expand in unexpected ways. It wasn't a perfect ending. There were still challenges ahead, resistance to overcome, and systems to transform. But it was a beginning filled with possibility, and for now, that was enough. 18 months after Zara Williams stood up in that boardroom, Vertex Innovations hosted its annual Innovation Showcase, a company-wide celebration of the year's most successful projects and the teams behind them. The grand atrium of Vertex headquarters had been transformed for the occasion, with product displays, interactive demonstrations, and presentation areas showcasing the company's newest innovations. The atmosphere was electric, a stark contrast to the tension and uncertainty that had characterized similar events in years past. Employees from all levels and departments mingled freely, many wearing T-shirts emblazoned with the slogan that had become something of a company mantra. Every voice matters. Every perspective counts. Richard Harrington stood on a small stage, surveying the scene with evident satisfaction. At 60, he had changed significantly over the past year and a half, not just in his leadership style, but in his personal demeanor. The stern, authoritative CEO had given way to a more accessible, reflective leader who seemed genuinely energized by the company's transformation. If I could have everyone's attention, he called, his voice amplified by the sound system. The buzz of conversation gradually subsided as employees gathered around the stage. Thank you all for being here today. This showcase represents far more than just the products and innovations you see around you. It represents a fundamental shift in how we work, how we collaborate, and how we define success at Vertex Innovations. He gestured to where Zara stood with her team, Jessica, Tarek, Carmen, and Aiden, along with newer members who had joined the transformation initiative over the months. 18 months ago, a courageous employee challenged me to see what I had been missing to recognize how our company was systematically excluding valuable perspectives, and as a result, limiting our potential. He smiled at Zara. That challenge led to the most significant transformation in Vertex's history, not because of executive mandate, but because of the collective commitment of everyone in this room to building a better company. The results spoke for themselves. Market share had increased by 22%. Employee retention had improved by 37% overall, with even greater improvements among women and people of color. And perhaps most significantly, Vertex had launched more successful new products in the past year than in the previous 3 years combined. Today, I'm pleased to announce the next phase in our company's evolution, Richard continued. The board of directors has approved a new executive leadership structure that reflects our commitment to diverse perspectives at every level of decision-making. A murmur of interest rippled through the crowd. Effective immediately, I will be transitioning to the role of executive chairman, focusing on long-term strategy and board governance. And I am both proud and excited to announce that Zara Williams will be stepping into the role of chief executive officer. Gasps and spontaneous applause erupted throughout the atrium. Zara felt a wave of emotion wash over her surprise, despite months of preparation and discussion, gratitude, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. Additionally, Richard continued once the applause subsided, Jessica Winters will assume the newly created role of Chief Transformation Officer, ensuring that the principles of inclusive innovation remain at the core of our organizational practice. Tarek Rahman will become our new Chief Product Officer, and Carmen Rodriguez will serve as General Counsel and Chief Ethics Officer. As Richard invited her to join him on stage, Zara took a moment to absorb the significance of the moment. 3 years ago, she had joined Vertex as an eager young professional, determined to make an impact, but unsure if her voice would ever truly be heard. Now she was stepping into the most influential role in the company, with the opportunity to continue the transformation they had begun together. "Thank you, Richard," she said as she took the microphone. "And thank you to everyone here who has been part of this journey. What we've accomplished together proves something I've always believed, that true innovation comes not from a single brilliant mind, but from the collision of diverse perspectives, experiences, and ideas." She looked out at the faces before her colleagues who had become allies, skeptics who had become supporters, and new employees attracted by Vertex's growing reputation as a place where talent could thrive regardless of background. "As your new CEO, I make this commitment. Vertex Innovations will continue to be a place where every voice matters, where the best ideas win regardless of who proposes them, and where we never stop challenging ourselves to see beyond our own limited perspectives." The applause that followed was thunderous, a genuine expression of support and shared purpose that reflected how far they had come. Later, as Zara circulated through the showcase, accepting congratulations and discussing future plans, she found herself beside a display featuring the company's most successful recent launch, the Prism platform that had grown from the ashes of the failed Next-Gen initiative. "It all started here in a way," said a familiar voice behind her. Zara turned to find Richard and Alina Harrington. "How so?" she asked. "This was the product you were discussing that day in the boardroom," Richard reminded her. "The one you said had been erased rather than innovated." Zara nodded, remembering. "It seems like a lifetime ago." "For the company it was," Alina observed. "Vertex today is fundamentally different from the company it was then." Richard placed a hand on Zara's shoulder. "I want you to know something. In 35 years of business, the best decision I ever made was to listen to you that day, not just to hear your words, but to really listen to what they meant." He glanced at his wife. "With a little help from Alina, of course." Alina smiled. "He's always needed a bit of translation assistance, but he got there." "We all did," Zara said. "That's what makes this story worth telling." And it was a story worth telling not just within the walls of Vertex Innovations, but beyond them. A story about the power of one voice to spark transformation, about the courage to speak truth to power and the wisdom to listen when truth is spoken, about how organizations, like people, can grow and change when they open themselves to perspectives they've previously excluded. As the new CEO of Vertex Innovations, Zara Williams would continue to tell this story, not just in words, but in actions that would shape the company's culture, products, and impact on the world for years to come. It was both an ending and a beginning, a resolution to the journey that had begun in that boardroom 18 months ago, and the start of a new chapter yet to be written. For now, surrounded by the tangible evidence of what was possible when every voice truly mattered, Zara allowed herself to simply be present in this moment of culmination and possibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities for growth, new chances to transform limitation into potential. And she was ready. If you enjoyed this story about transformation and the power of diverse perspectives in the workplace, please consider subscribing to our channel for more meaningful narratives that challenge assumptions and inspire positive change. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever spoken up when it was difficult? What happened as a result?